The hardest thing in the world is another person. I remember when I first heard this, it was from my mentor, Roddy, Mr. Roddy Campbell. He is the former global CEO of Adidas. So he'd kind of been at the top job, parachuted in as a turnaround specialist at one of the biggest companies in the world. And it also cost him his relationship at the time. And I remember him saying that, Jack, the hardest thing in the world is another person. And I was thinking, really? I mean, gosh, there's so many things that are hard about life, right? There are so many travesties of justice, so many uncertainties, precarities, so much aggression and violence, and we could go on and on, right, with the list of things that are difficult or unjust in the world. But I don't think when I heard it then that I really got what he meant. And I think over the course of the next decade, I got much more what he meant. So I want to talk to you about this. And the way that I'm approaching this is not for you to be down about the possibilities of love in your life, because I think, loving and relating are some of the best things that we get to do. But they may also at times be the most difficult. One of the reasons that another human being is difficult is because they likely don't operate in the same way that we do, right? If there was such a thing as like an objective user manual for every person, right? Here's how to understand and get the best out of each person. You would have a unique manual, right? And the chances that your manual would look like the people that you interact most with, right? Whether that's your family, your lover, your friends, your co-workers, your clients, the chances are pretty slim that you're gonna have the same manual. There will be some overlap, but where you're probably gonna find the challenge is where there's difference and it's unacknowledged difference, right? So part of what's difficult about another human being is we don't know what that manual is. They may not know what that manual is. And even if they do know what that manual is, whether they have a way of communicating what that manual is to us in a way that we understand based upon our inherently limited life experience, that's another question, right? So oftentimes, even when they're trying to explain like, hey, this thing you're doing doesn't work for me, or hey, stop talking to me in this way, or hey, stop doing this thing, whether we are able to fully internalize and integrate that as a new way of being, whether we even want to firstly, but let's say we did and we're able to, that's a completely different thing. So humans can be hard because we have a tendency to want to subjectify each other, right? Meaning we want to imagine that when this person is tired, what they need is what I would need when I was tired, right? When I'm tired, I want the world to go away, right? Or when I'm tired, I just want to snuggle up with my partner and watch some Netflix, right? Or when I'm tired, I actually want people to tend to me, right? I want someone to go, make me dinner or, massage my feet. I actually want more attention when I'm tired. For some of you, when you're tired, you want less attention, right? And that's just one of, an infinite number of examples. We might imagine that when someone is triggered, they need the same thing that we do, right? Perhaps when you're triggered, what you're really looking for is reassurance. But some people, when they're triggered, want space. Or some people, when they're triggered, actually want time to be able to digest their own experience and then come back into contact. Some people like to keep their options open, right? Some people like to really narrow their options down. So if you're someone that likes to converge, right, to, in Myers-Briggs speaks, kind of J, right, that J preference to judging preference, we want to narrow the possibilities and land on something and stick to it. And you find yourself, in whatever relationship with someone who actually has that perceiving, kind of keeping open, fluid to change, doing things in a more last-minute fashion, that is likely, even when you understand it fully, it's still likely to rub you at times, right, or to be difficult for you. Now, where this gets even more interesting is sometimes as a choice of romantic partner, we might select someone who is absolutely going to trigger us, right? Now, from a spiritual perspective, we might say, that's great. We pick someone to trigger us because actually it wakes us up, right? And there can be some truth to that, right? That, yeah, you select this person, they even unwittingly keep pressing your buttons, and you get to see, oh, I have a button here. At your best, you say, my lover, I'm so grateful that you keep pressing my buttons because you show me the true path of my spiritual development. Now, I know most of you are saying that many times a week in your lives, right? No, even if that's what happens our best, when we're triggered, typically what we think is, why are you doing this? We've talked about this. You know that these are my buttons and you maliciously, with intent or with a lack of consideration, you keep pressing them. And yes, I'm disappointed, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, and I'm completely triggered. But I have a righteousness to my trigger because I've told you about this, right? Imagine if you could actually just tell something to someone once and they got it and could immediately, like a software upgrade, just like, boom, got it. And like my behavior's changed. Have you met many of these human beings? I haven't met many of these human beings. I don't think I'm this kind of human being. Are you this kind of human being? Now, some people are so tuned in to what other people want, right? AKA a people pleaser, that when someone says to you, hey, that this thing, right? Like it really matters to me that, or please don't ever, you might be so focused on that and so willing to shapeshift and adapt yourself, right? And maybe even if we don't say shapeshift in a negative way, just you are so unbelievably adaptive and flexible that when someone says, yeah, never be late, you just go, boom, I'll never be late for that person, right? So that it might be that that's possible for you. Here's the challenge. It's going to make other people really difficult because the vast majority of other people, they don't operate like that. They don't have that capacity. Even if they wanted to, they might not be able to do that, right? So you then might get frustrated like, oh my gosh, I've changed, adapted, shapeshifted. I gave this up. I've become punctual. I dress in this way, or I've let this friend go, or I've changed my style of work, or I've changed my hours. I've done all these things. And yet this person, what have they done, right? They're just doing the same old. And I've told them time and again that if they talk to this person, I feel jealous, right? Or if they don't make plans, I don't feel like they care, right? Or that my love language is quality time. I've told them 10 times my love language is quality time. Now, I want you to get that need met. The reality is, if someone's love language is quality time, they can probably meet that need. You might not have even had to mention it. But the reason it's come up is because their love language isn't quality time. So it's almost like this thing that is outside of their awareness needs to be able to come into their awareness enough and then start to integrate in their way of being, all while they have everything that they're managing in their life, right? The stresses of being a human, the sufferings of being a human, their overcommitments, the way that their boss is dealing with them, the chronic health issue that they're going through, etc., etc. And they need to integrate this behavior for you. Now, in an ideal world, maybe they'd be able to do that, right? The reality is you and I do not live in the ideal world, right? You and I live in the world. And the world is often frustrating, limiting, and most of us don't have the capacity, certainly in short notice, to integrate things as new ways of being, right? This is partly why people work with someone like me or a coach, because if we're going to integrate a new way of being, we want to do that work through weeks and months, right? And put you in an immersive container. This is why people come and join my, I have a live group program we run, it's called The Transformation. We run over 6 months. And part of the reason we run over 6 months is because that's a decent amount of time to start to integrate new ways of being. But you saying something to someone during an argument which is completely outside their awareness and they have no way of actually knowing how to integrate it, let alone putting consistent attention on it, and then the second time it comes up, you're already triggered again, and now the 10th time it's come up, you're ready to like blow your top. That's just difficult, right? That's why sometimes the hardest thing is another human being. So you might be listening to this and thinking, wow, okay, thanks, Jack. Thanks for I thought your name was Jack, not Debbie Downer, like. I don't know. What's the equivalent of Debbie Downer? Ken the Cantankerous. Oh, we shouldn't be talking about Ken. I've not seen Barbie, so I'm okay. I can't comment. I maybe will see it. Anyway, I digress. The point is, I'm not trying to give you just a doom story here, right? To me, sobriety is not a doom story. Sobriety is something like reality as pristinely as we can see it, right? So it's actually not got an effective component, right? It's not got a judgmental, good, bad, negative, positive component. It's like, it is. Where this territory changes can be in our realizing that we are the hardest person in the world, or at least, let's just say we're a difficult person, right? There are some things about us that might be difficult. Even if you don't find them difficult, someone else might find them difficult, right? Let's just go back to you're keeping things open and being last minute. To some people, that's going to be a gift. To other people, that's going to be a challenge, right? Maybe the way you think of yourself, right? Maybe your self-identity is I'm loving and generous, right? But what you maybe also don't include quite so upfront is that you're also possessive, or you're controlling. Or maybe your self-identity is I'm sweet and gentle. But maybe you don't track the ways that you are being sweet and gentle to people that actually deserve to be handled in a more firm way, right? And that creates issues for your partner. Your sweet nature means that perhaps your sister is walking on you, but you never stand up to her, and now that has an impact on your friend, or now that has an impact on your partner, right? So even the places that we might have a super positive self-image, right? Sweetness is a great quality. Generosity is a great quality. Being loving and giving is a great quality, right? But we nearly always have to pay a price on the altar of liability at the same time, right? So no one can be only sweet, because we're humans, we're animals, we have instincts. We have things like self-serving bias. We have things like aggression. We have things like mood swings. We have things like seasons of our life. We have things like I'm available and not available, right? Certain seasons of your life you might be super available for doing the inner work. Other seasons you might be maxed out, right? We have disease, illness. You know, again, I'm not trying to say these are down. These are just part of the reality of life. You don't have to hold that as a negative thing. You can just hold that's a thing, right? Human beings are dealing with a lot. Most people that you know are not living in a script that was given to them. Right? They are living, at least in part, a self-authoring, more self-expressed style of living. Now, sometimes people say, well, yeah, in the postmodern West, we've become hypnotized to our own self-expression and we've forgotten, you know, duty, honor, and some of these more traditional values. And there's probably something true in that critique. True or otherwise, the reality is right now, most of the people you know are figuring things out that they didn't inherit a strong social script to help them figure it out. Now, you might say, well, that's not true. Perhaps you have... let's say you have a biblical worldview. You might say, well, look, you know, most of these answers are there for people. It's just they've turned away from them, right? There might be some truth in that. The reality is most people aren't pausing their life for that biblical truth. So if that's not available to them for whatever reason, the reality is they're living in a different set of constructs, right? And a lot of our social constructs, whether it's even some of the fundamentals, like what is a man and what is a woman, are being deconstructed in postmodernism. We're opening up the script, and all of that is happening all the time. Now, there's many ways that it's a complete advantage, obviously, to be alive in today's world. But I'm just saying, next time you're triggered by someone, even if your higher self might say, thank you so much for triggering me, this opens me up to where I'm wounded or where I need to do the work or where I'm still superimposing mom or dad or my sister or brother or my first guy or my ex-husband on you, most of the time when we're triggered, we don't want to be. It's a gnarly experience, right? It's to age regress, to feel stressed, to feel, probably tense, angry, stomach crunched. You might be sweating. Your heart rate's probably going up. You're probably on overdrive mentally. You're probably trying to figure out, is this a real threat? So much going on. So very few of us like that experience, right? It might be that we can start to put that experience to work. Sometimes, here's the irony, is the triggering is what's waking you up, but you might not be able to handle it with the other person, right? So sometimes it's almost like, you know, back to Roddy saying this is the hardest person in the world. It might be the wakefulness they're going to bring you. You get to really get the fruit of that wakefulness, not with them, right? Sometimes you get the fruit of the wakefulness in the period after a relationship where you're going to metabolize what happened. Sometimes you might get it and you might take it into your next relationship. You still might not get it there, but you might get another flavor of it. And then eventually you kind of connect the dots, right? Particularly if you're in this stage we call relationship lessons, where you're likely to have multiple connections, dates, relationships that are sort of teaching you a theme, but most of us don't get it at the first call, right? That was always was it Alan Watts, the kind of the Zen teacher, who'd say, you know, the reason that people want to have an altered state of experience, which they might get through, you know, medicine, is because they want to experience, you know, some of the non-egoic kind of, you know, oneness of reality. But most of people, it's not like they have that once. They get the call and they go, hey, thanks, I got the call, and now it's integrated, right? They want to have that experience multiple times, even go after it and think, wow, that's what I'm meant to be doing, like the hedonistic seeking of it. And then eventually, maybe it comes together and they realize, okay, yeah, it's not actually about the drug, right? It's about a more day-to-day, moment-to-moment relationship with reality. Most of us aren't going to get the call when we get the trigger, right? Most of us are going to get multiply triggered ongoingly, and we might not be able to solve it immediately, right? It might be that we can solve it at one layer, right? Like I could say to you, don't be late, and then I won't get triggered, right? And we could maybe solve it because perhaps you're either someone who's pretty punctual, or you're so like, oh gosh, I so want to honor Jack's desire that I'll learn how to be punctual, right? But what happens when, you know, your new employee or your, you know, sister's best friend or the Uber driver, whoever is late? You know, like you can't just remove a lack of punctuality from the world, right? You can, in the sense you can say, if you want to hang in my reality and be day to day in my world, I need punctual people. So if you're not punctual, hey, we're not going to align, right? That is one way out. But chances are there's still going to be places in life. What would be better typically is if we can do that inner work to honor ourselves, right? Where we need to say, hey, I'm not gonna go to the cinema 30 minutes late. That doesn't work for me. So you honor yourself, but to also develop the kind of immune system where things aren't actually triggering you, right? Where you can say someone else's punctuality is a little bit on them, and if there's impacts on me, I can either be a little bit flexible, or actually I'll take the decision so there's not the impact on me, right? Like, I'll see you at the cinema, I don't want to miss it. Or we're now going to be too late for the airport for my liking, so I am going to book my own Uber and I'll see you there, right? So you might have to individuate and honor your own desires, but that doesn't mean that you can always arrange the furniture in the world so that you never get triggered, right? That would be a huge project, and one that's going to likely end in frustration. It's better to take those triggers and then notice, okay, what is it that I need to honor in me that maybe I'm not honoring me, which might be renegotiating agreements. It might be letting people even know where you stand, letting people know what your desires are. But then noticing, well, why does this trigger me so much, right? Okay, so if someone's late, why does that trigger me so much, right? Is it because I have difficulty being in my own company, right? Is it because I consider myself a busy, successful CEO, and the fact that this person's late is actually challenging my self-image and identity? Now, is that a good or bad thing, right? Now, maybe it's good that I walk around in this sort of big CEO persona, but maybe I'm a little identified there, right? And I need people to see me that way. And when they don't, it's like an ego attack and I can't be with it. And maybe I actually want more flexibility there. Maybe I want to be able to be the CEO when I'm CEO, but maybe I also want to be able to be just a regular person at the same time. Or maybe I want to, be able to hold them to account and say, look, this being late doesn't work for me. But maybe I want to be able to do that without losing half of hour of my life to being triggered, right? So when we acknowledge that other people are difficult, we can use it as an opportunity to wake up something over here. And we can also start to get more curious, like in a more objective way. How are you difficult, right? How am I difficult? I have a ton of sensitivities. I'm really impacted by the weather. My energy and mood varies a lot. I'm kind of extroverted and introverted, and I don't always know in advance which one's going to be here. I have a ton of food preferences, and they evolve, and I shift with them. Sometimes I'm not being the best at apologizing. Sometimes I get energetically impacted in ways that even surprise me. Sometimes I have ideas upon ideas. I can be in a very creative mode, and it can make it hard to alight quickly on a plan. Sometimes I can be super decisive in ways that will surprise people. Sometimes I can make big decisions quickly and small decisions slowly. And, we could go on, right? I want to know what that is for you. You can hit me up in the comments. I'd love to read it. But mostly I want to know it, not so I know it. I want to know it so that you're in touch with it, right? Because the more that you're in touch with, these are some ways that I am difficult or different or less accommodating or harder to accommodate than other people, the more you're in touch with that, the more easy it is going to be the reality that every person's going to be difficult in some ways. Now, people are also genius and brilliant and smart and creative and loving and beautiful and heart open and generous and wonderful and amazing and magical. So none of that is being disputed. It's just saying, sometimes what is limiting is actually it's not the ceiling, it's not the heights that we can go to people, it's the floor, right? It's the fact that we're getting triggered, we're struggling, we're not able to find each other, our realities are just butting up against each other too much, or the thing that I need when I'm triggered you don't even know how to provide, and the thing that you need when you're triggered I don't know how to provide. So now we're just in this sort of mutual trigger fest. I don't know if you've been in that. Those things can be incredibly difficult. So props to you if you're doing this kind of work on yourself and you're allowing it to wake you up whilst you're also cultivating the compassion for someone else that they're having a different experience, right? If you'd been there on their shoulder through their whole life, you may still struggle to make sense of it all, right? Because you're not actually fully on the inside of the experience, but you'd probably make a lot more sense of it if you were like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, when you were frustrated, everyone ignored you, right? So now even if I'm not trying to, but you have the experience that I'm ignoring you, it's bringing up all this history of where you were like a frustrated kid and people just left you to your own devices and you actually needed support. You actually needed someone to care and you haven't had that. So, wow, okay, let me get this. So when I leave you alone, and I'm not even trying to do that, like I'm just focused over here, but my attention isn't on you, you have the experience of feeling ignored. Now you get flooded with all this childhood frustration, and it hits your wound that you're not lovable because no one was loving you when you were in that experience. That would make sense that you're triggered. I still may not like you being triggered, or I might not like what happens, or it might not even be that you and I have a full way forward. All of that's possible, but I'm a little bit closer to understanding what actually might be going on there. And likewise, oh, okay, yeah, when you interrupt me, and if you know my history of having the experience of feeling interrupted and that not feeling good, you get that it's not just that you're interrupting me, you're hitting the trigger wound called getting interrupted. And what does that really mean? It means, oh, I'm not being heard, or what I'm saying is not valuable, which really means something like I'm not valuable or I'm not loved. So, you know, when you really drill down on these things, there's probably a number of core wounds that we're typically hitting. But am I able in the moment that I feel frustrated, that I'm being interrupted, to communicate the whole backstory on that? Probably not. I'm probably not even in contact with the time. I might not have even done the excavation to realize it. But even if I have, it may be difficult for me to fully communicate that. And it would be better to communicate it like, hey, you know, we're sat down having a glass of wine saying, hey, let me tell you about my core wounds and triggers. But typically this stuff, you know, it gets brought up through actual lived experience, right? It's not like we're just preparing people for all the triggers that they might hit and saying, hey, when you hit this one, here's how we deal with it. When you hit this one, here's how we deal with it. And even if you knew that, and even if you were able to communicate it, you can bet your bottom dollar that people are going to still hit those triggers, right? And not necessarily because they're being malicious. It could be because they're not being considerate. But there's so much to consider all the time, right? We're all inconsiderate because we can't consider everything all the time, right? If I'm paying attention to the weather, can I also pay attention to the humidity? Can I also pay attention to the wind? Can I also pay attention to food, to drink, to comfort? Can I also pay attention to your emotional experience, to my emotional experience, to making sure we have a plan? You know, life is happening all the time within the context it's happening, right? Which is, we already may be under stress, you know, COVID stress, financial stress, work stress, family stress. You know, maybe someone's not showing up for you at all, or you're losing someone, you know, whether it's literally you're losing someone because they're on a path of decline, or you're actually losing someone because they just stopped communicating with you. Like, nearly everyone is dealing with stuff. And so there can sometimes be a little bit of realizing the way that a lot of modern and postmodern dating and relating is constituted, it puts a lot of pressure on the relationship, right? So actually even just sort of realizing like, okay, we're not getting a way forward right now with this trigger. I'm actually just going to redirect some attention to somewhere else because I get it, like you're overloaded, I'm overloaded. That's not a great combination here. So not everything needs to be resolved all the time in the moment, right? Sometimes actually just taking time out and just kind of realizing, yeah, like we're gonna do this, and it might not be workable, right? So I'm leaving open the possibility that, yeah, the way that we trigger each other, or the way that we can't find each other, or the way that our values are different, that might not be actually compatible for us. But realizing that you're difficult, I'm difficult, and let's proceed from there, I think is a more reasonable premise than certainly a lot of premises that I've been in the past, and maybe that you or I could be in the present. So I'd love to see what you're taking from this video. Let me know. What have you found most difficult in other people? What might be difficult about yourself? Give this video a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you want more of this kind of self-development content. I release multiple videos every week, and I'd be excited for you to be part of this community. So hit that subscribe, and as always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being here.